Hello and welcome to my Planet Zoo series. I'm starting off here by doing some scenarios. I have bigger plans, of course, for what I'm going to do in Planet Zoo, but I thought starting with scenarios would be a pretty good idea to kind of ease myself into it. We're panning here over the first scenario, the first zoo that we come up against. It's a relatively straightforward zoo, kind of just teaching you the basics of the game. So my plan here was to go through it, quickly speed through all of the things that it kind of wants us to do. If there's a part where I get to customize a little bit more, I'll slow it down a bit. But for the most part, I will just quickly show you everything that they wanted me to do to get through the scenario. I will be doing another scenario afterwards, and that one I will take a bit slower because I will take some more time to kind of decorate nicer. But for now, I will show you all the different things that I have to do in this scenario, and then we'll move on to the other one. I will be using speed building techniques, so I'll speed up the footage so you don't have to sit and watch me do everything, and I will also cut between different activities that I do. But you can see that this zoo looks relatively simple, straightforward. It's simple and pretty, but it doesn't really go much further than that. So the kind of things that they want you to do is they want you to kind of get into it, familiarize yourself with the controls, which you'll see me doing here. So I'm zooming in on different exhibits and working out everything like that. They want me to add some warthogs in, so I adopt them, send them into the zoo, and then I begin to kind of furnish their habitat. You can see them getting brought in there by the caretaker. And I do a little bit of reading about like what a warthog needs, but I'm kind of limited in this scenario. In a normal franchise zoo or something, which I will be doing at some point, I'll be able to customize a bit more. But here I just place down some food, forage, mud bath, all of that. It then wants me to build a habitat for some ostriches, so I quickly get that done. There is a part here where I try and add a glass wall, but I can only add one, so I do. I adopt some ostriches, pop them in the zoo, and then continue to kind of populate their area. Again, kind of rushing through this at this part in the scenario. I haven't wanted to spend too much time on it because it's something I've done before. I think it's something most of us have done before, but it's enough to get us to that bronze star, and that counts. It's teaching me how to place some buildings here, so I go ahead and do that, and then I'm building another habitat, this time for Bengal tigers. I struggled a little bit with the lengths of walls here. You have to build within the kind of glowing zone, which makes it a bit more difficult. But I adopt the tigers, I send them all in, and it's all going well here. I get a little bit more time to customize here, so I'm a bit confused at this point about those shadows on the floor. I think someone let go of a balloon, and that's what it actually is. But I noticed that the habitat for the tigers isn't quite what they want, and it tells you to add a bit more soil to make it suitable for them, which I go ahead and do. I'm kind of placing it in areas where it looks a bit more natural, so around the foliage, around the shelter there, and around the pond. I probably would have done a little bit more than that if I could, but in this scenario I didn't think so much. And you can see I'm just removing the non-natural foliage for the species. They're requiring the kind of the temperate and the tropical. So I've popped in some bushes, and I'm kind of grouping the foliage in points of interest, so around harsh angles, and I like to put lots of the same foliage together to make it look like it's kind of grown up around each other. So I'm putting some reeds around the little pond there, and then whilst I'm placing these bamboo stems at the back, we get our second star, our silver star, which allows us to move on. And move right along, we do indeed. I am here adopting some Indian peafowl and putting it in this maze-like habitat here that they've made. I then head over to the snow leopard and place some coolers down because obviously the zoo is not made for a snow leopard. I changed the terrain up a little bit, putting snow in, putting some rock in places where I think it would suit the habitat itself. And then the next thing I do is I go about and I fix up the welfare of all the animals. You can see there was a lion cub that was stuck and couldn't escape, so its welfare was pretty poor. I noticed loads of the animals weren't being fed properly, so I went and I hired some more keepers or upgraded those that already existed. And then I went between the habitats and I improved them. So there we added some enrichment for the elephants. I was worried that maybe the peafowl weren't getting enough food since we added more of them, so I added another food tray for them. And then same for these tortoises here. I've added some toy enrichment and then some hard shelter as well, because I noticed that was something they were lacking. Spent a bit of time workshopping what I want for it there. And eventually I settle on some wooden ones. I didn't want to go over the top with this, seeing as it is just a scenario tutorial more than anything. But you can see here I drag their bed about. I add another hard shelter in here. They were getting a little bit stressed out, which you'll see later, but they're slow animals, so I think that might be the problem. They couldn't escape. These hippos here, they needed some more socialization, but I wasn't actually able to adopt any, so I just decided to go and change up their habitat a little bit to make it a bit nicer for them, adding some toys and kind of just making it a bit more comfortable. And the same here for the zebra, and we had done so earlier with the giraffe. We're just kind of improving all these different habitats. You can see here I spent some time trying to work out how the one-way glass worked. I'd never actually used it before, and I did struggle, but I got the hang of it there towards the end and decided to go and add in some toys for the lemurs here. I thought about putting them in nicer places, but I kind of got to the point where I was thinking, you know what, I'd rather spend more time on my own zoo doing this than on this kind of scenario zoo, so I just got it done. Went back to the warthog exhibit and placed some toys that they might like and some feeding stations. I think that was what I was doing there, some food enrichment. And then I added some toys and food enrichment for the tortoises there. Same for the peafowl. We've been back to them multiple times now, but they still needed more and more. And I kept looking why the welfare was so low, and it was animals getting stressed out like those tortoises there. So I figured it would give us time to get them sorted whilst we go and see the ostriches, and it did. As soon as I was trying to place some glass there to rectify that earlier mistake, we finished it. And that brings us on to the next scenario. Now, again, this one has a lot of tutorial elements to it, but it is the Simian Park, so it's got a lot of apes in it. I will skip out a lot more of the kind of tutorial parts for this one. I figure you've had your fill of that from the first part, and you know that I know how to play the game. But just know that there were other tutorial parts in this one, such as improving the welfare of animals, making sure that they are inside their habitats. One escapes at one point because a barrier breaks down, and you have to get a vet to go and fetch the animal and then repair the barrier to make sure no other ones escape, which you've also put all of them in boxes. So it's pretty straightforward stuff. It all makes sense, but it is quite a nice thematically structured zoo. It does look quite pretty, and I thought that it would be a good idea to kind of take some of the themes that they've done and build on them myself. I have a challenge at some point in this scenario to increase the number of species in the zoo by 3. And I thought I'd start off with some exhibits and then some habitats, because I didn't want to go too deep into it for a scenario. So here I'm kind of getting the different exhibits that I want. I will be honest with you, I'm not happy with what I do here, and I do go and change it, but I decided to leave it in just to show that I kind of workshopped a couple of things, trying to do what I can until I actually settle on what I want. This scenario doesn't allow you to change the terrain at all, so I kind of decide to work around that before I end up doing what I actually want to do. So I place a couple paths. I'm trying to create some kind of pavilion areas more than anything. I'm really struggling with how it looks right now. This is admittedly how I used to play the game. So the two species I get is the giant land snail there. I get one of those. And then in the other exhibit, I think we'll see me adopt it in a moment. I think I go for an iguana perhaps, or I definitely go for a frog as well. So as soon as that shows up, I'll get the Goliath frog. But that takes its time. So I look at these hippos. They have a poor social status, so I need to go and add some more social features. So I think I adopt another hippo in a little bit. So I keep looking for a hippo, but there's the Goliath frog going in there. And I take some time to look at it, and I'm just not happy with what I've done so far. I know that I can do better, and I feel like I've just been limited by what I have there. So I decide to move all of the animals to the trading center and then just go and delete everything, getting ready to start again, which I'm really glad I did, if I'm honest. I think it was the best decision I could have done for that area. So I take another look at it here and I decide I'm going to do it elevated, because why not? It would be, if I can't deal with raising the terrain, why not raise the pathway instead? So I pop some of those exhibits back in there, nice and neatly in a grid, and then realize that I have to delete the entire thing again in order to get the path to connect. But it's not as bad this time. I make a kind of sideways heart shape for the exhibit area here, and I place down a wind turbine. Later I realize that creates negative impact on guests, so I go about and change that, but for now it's just there on the side. I go and fill up the exhibit education boards for these animals and adjust their temperature and humidity to make it what it should be. So brilliant, we've got them in there. I rename them just because I feel it gives a bit more of a personal touch if you give a name to the different exhibits and habitats that you've got. I know it's not essential. And then you can see me there adopting a hippo. Later on I'll go and expand their habitat, but I don't include that in the footage because it was quite dull to do, if I'm honest, and I didn't want to make you all go through it as well. So there we go. I tried to get an iguana there, you see, but I also realized that we already have iguanas in the zoo, so I didn't want to go and add unnecessary stuff for this scenario. So I go for a right angle roof there with some eaves there, 2 meter eaves I settle on. And I really like the design that I went for there. I think previously, if I was doing this kind of thing, I wouldn't have made that sideways thing. I probably would have put a little hat on each of them. But I'm glad I did what I did there. And then I add a canopy overhanging this extra space that we have here. I figure I can turn it into something like a seating area for the guests, which I do go on to do. And then I spend some time trying to make the pole look right so it looks adequately supported. In the end, I am happy with what I've done there. I think that looks like a really neat way to get it laid out. I group everything together because I want to make it all nice and kind of collected, and add in some donation bins. And you can see me here adding in hand sanitization stations and picnic benches because I don't want people to be getting their hands dirty and then eating, so I've made sure it's nice and clean. I wanted that area to look a little more enclosed, so I went ahead and added some eaves on there. I thought about adding them on the end of the buildings, and maybe I should have. Maybe that would have been a good idea, but that's something to bear in mind in the future. And I added some signs to make sure that people don't tap on the glass or anything like that. We had some issues with research, so I researched more things and allowed them to get nicer environments there as well. So I wanted to add some lighting in here. It took me a little while to add the lighting as I wanted, but we went ahead and did that just to make sure that everything looked good and lit up there. Okay, so now I realize that it's having that negative impact, so I go ahead and try and make this wind turbine look a little nicer to try and reduce the negative impact it's having. I don't do it to such a great extent, and I realize that I have to change that later. I then think, why don't I add some nice facilities for the guests there? So I start thinking about facilities I can add there. I will get back to that in a bit. But I struggled to move the turbine, which I eventually go and do. And then I didn't like how it looked, so I went and added some foliage to kind of hide it a little bit, and then made sure the foliage wasn't in the blades of the turbine. So that's the wind turbine done there. I added some flooring just to make it look a bit neater. And then I popped in a toilet, and I think I go ahead and place a shop in here just to kind of give them a little bit more freedom. I believe it's an information center maybe, just to kind of add something for the guests to go over there and see. And then I noticed that they're really crowding in there, so I went ahead and added an extra pathway to make sure that all the guests can get across okay. So now I'm thinking, I'm happy with that area. I want to get another habitat animal. So I think a tapir would be a good idea. They're kind of tropical. There's something we can adopt in this, and I saw them earlier, and I quite like tapirs. I used to play Zoo Tycoon quite a lot, and they were an animal that I would always add in just because I thought they were really, really cool. So first things first, I have to set up a barrier for them. I later learned a lot more about barriers, so this is kind of a very basic barrier setup here, but I connect it to the hippo exhibit just because I kind of thought it would look cool to have them bordering each other. I move about some of the trees and I spent ages trying to get this pathing to work right. It seems that Planet Zoo pathing is what I remember it to be, but I do manage to find a way that suits it well. Fix up some of the surrounding terrain there. And then, again, I go back to the exhibits here because I realize I haven't created a work zone for them to exist in. So I make sure that they have what they need, and that means adding a keeper hut. I place it near to the wind turbine because I know that they don't like having keeper huts as well, despite the fact that, you know, I think seeing a keeper hut in a zoo is a pretty cool thing, but I can imagine the smell might not be that great. And now I think a pretty cool idea to have for these tapir would be to have some kind of guest walkthrough. I vastly overestimated how happy the tapir would be with the guests being there. And at the end of the video, you'll see the adjustments I've made to make them less stressed, because stress becomes a big problem for these tapir. It's something that I have thought about and given me a lot to consider when creating habitats in the future. So I'm quite glad that I went about it this way, learnt what not to do, and then I can do it better next time. So I put down the food bowl there for the tapir. I surround it with some foliage to make it look a little bit more natural, so it's not just standing on its own. And I do a little bit of research now to see what kind of situation a tapir would like to have their bedding in. I add some scratching posts there, and then I put some dead trees to make it look like, you know, they could scratch against the dead trees as well. And then to border the pond, I put some mangrove trees. I really like how those look with the roots. I think I'd love to do a build with that in the future. There wasn't much information on how tapir like to have their houses, but I thought a little cave couldn't go amiss. I probably would do something a bit different in the future, but I just wanted to get something so that they didn't feel so stressed by being watched at this point. It was already becoming a problem, so I wanted to get them somewhere that they could go and hide if they wanted to. But then it looked a little bit odd just standing on its own, so I decided to put some trees around and clear up the other trees that the scenario just placed down as it was. I neatened it up a little bit and kept checking to see if there was another tapir. I knew that this one would be lonely and would want another, so I kept on checking. You can see there something that I quite liked doing, which was putting some foliage around the bottom of trees, and you'll see a lot more of that in future episodes, I'm sure. So I placed some I think it was cheese plants around the bottom there, and then I tried to create somewhere for the tapir to feel like it was more undercover. You can see the roots of those trees there. I actually am not a huge fan of how I did that. I think those trees would look really good on top of rocks and having the roots cascade down the rocks. So that's something that I will definitely do at some point in a different build. And then I added some rocks around the edge to kind of make it look a little bit more natural, so it wasn't just a pond on its own. I thought adding some rocks would kind of add a bit of character to it. I then wanted to give some attention to this guest area. I know education is important. I wanted to make sure that I could at least provide some entertainment for the guests. This all gets moved later, apart from the ambient, the education speaker and the ambient speaker. I forget to move them, but it's all good. But with a couple of signs to place there, we've got our 2 tapir in there, which comes in there with the second one, and I'm able to get a gold star for this scenario. So the next thing I want to show you is kind of just a walkthrough through the exhibits. I'll be quiet for this part so you can hear the sounds of the game and just enjoy. Thanks so much for watching this first part of the Planet Zoo scenarios, and I hope to see you again in the next one.